A whistleblower is expected to issue a stark warning to lawmakers today that the U.S. has become, quote, the middleman in a multi-billion-dollar migrant child trafficking operation at the border.
Brace yourselves for a reality check. Child trafficking isn't just a far-off nightmare. It's lurking right under our noses. Behind closed doors, in the shadows of our own communities, innocence is being traded like Pokemon cards. The numbers don't lie, folks. Thousands of migrant children are getting tangled in this web of darkness, their childhood stolen. But let's hold on to our moral compasses, because here's where it gets wild. A whistleblower steps into the spotlight, ready to spill the tea. And guess what they're serving? A piping hot revelation about Uncle Sam's involvement in a multi-billion-dollar trafficking scheme. Find out the details in this video. Child trafficking in the U.S. Recently, a whistleblower, Tara Lee Rodas, a former employee of the Health and Human Services Inspector General's office, has stepped forward to shed light on a problem that predates the current administration but has intensified during the ongoing migrant crisis. In her written testimony, Rodas reveals the horrifying truth that unaccompanied migrant children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that spans from their home countries to the U.S. border. These children work overnight shifts at slaughterhouses, factories, and restaurants to pay their debts to smugglers and traffickers. For nearly a decade, unaccompanied children have been suffering in the shadows. Rodas, who volunteered at an emergency intake site in California to assist the HHS Office of Refugee Resettlement in identifying sponsors for minors who have crossed the border, was shocked to discover the extent of the trafficking network. Instead of placing children in loving homes, she found that they were being funneled into the hands of sponsors, some of whom were criminals, traffickers, and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Whether intentional or not, it can be argued that the U.S. government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation run by bad actors seeking to profit off the lives of children. These shocking revelations paint a grim picture of the reality faced by unaccompanied children who make the treacherous journey to the U.S. border. Instead of finding safety and protection, they are thrust into a world of exploitation and abuse. The system that was meant to provide them with a lifeline has become a conduit for their suffering. But Tara Lee Rodas is not the only witness to come forward. Sheena Rodriguez, the founder and president of Alliance for a Safe Texas, has also encountered unaccompanied children at the border and has heard their harrowing stories. Teenage boys who have been transported through Mexico by cartel cooperatives have disclosed to Rodriguez that they were held captive in warehouses with armed guards. Rodriguez said, "We can no longer turn a blind eye and pretend this isn't happening. Congress has the power to stop this, which is why I am calling on you to do what is right." Rodriguez's testimony further emphasizes the urgent need for a thorough investigation into the federal agencies responsible for these atrocities. The safety and well-being of these vulnerable children must be prioritized, and the practice of releasing them to sponsors without proper vetting and oversight must come to an end. Joining the chorus of voices demanding action is Jessica Vaughn, the Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies. Vaughn highlights the need to close legal loopholes that have forced the government to operate a massive catch-and-release program for illegally arriving alien children. Vaughn said, "They have been carelessly funneled through the custody of U.S. government agencies and contractors and handed off to very lightly vetted sponsors in our communities without regard to their safety and well-being. There is no question that the system for processing minors who cross illegally is dysfunctional and has been for some time and needs to be fixed." The testimonies of these brave individuals paint a disturbing picture of a system that has failed to protect the most vulnerable among us. The U.S. government's role as the middleman in this multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation is a stain on the nation's conscience. Vaughn's words underscore the systemic failures that have allowed this child trafficking operation to thrive. It is clear that immediate action is needed to protect these children and ensure their well-being. However, the response from government officials has been mixed. HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra has pushed back on the allegations that his agency has been unable to contact over 85,000 minors. He said, "I have never heard that number of 85,000. I don't know where it comes from, so I would say it doesn't sound at all to be realistic. And what we do is we try and follow up as best we can with these kids." Becerra's denial raises questions about the extent of the government's knowledge and involvement in this crisis. While he claims that HHS authorities do their best to follow up with the children, he acknowledges that their authorities end once a suitable sponsor is found. This lack of oversight and accountability is deeply concerning. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Susan Rice, the former domestic policy advisor, has denied any knowledge of a systematic problem with child labor or migrant child labor. She said, "We were never informed of any kind of systematic problem with child labor or migrant child labor." Rice's denial raises further questions about the level of awareness within the administration and the actions taken to address these issues. The mounting evidence and testimonies from whistleblowers suggest a significant failure in protecting these vulnerable children. As the scandal continues to unfold, it is clear that congressional action is necessary to address the systemic failures that have allowed this multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation to persist. Above all else, the safety and well-being of these children must be prioritized. Child trafficking is only one side of the coin. Another even broader issue that has been raised recently is child sex trafficking. It's a chilling reality that the United States has become a top destination for child sex trafficking. This unimaginable crime knows no bounds, infiltrating every corner of the country. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, an estimated 1 in 7 endangered runaways were likely child sex trafficking victims. Let that sink in for a moment. In a nation that prides itself on freedom and justice, thousands of innocent children are falling victim to this modern-day slavery. The statistics surrounding child sex trafficking in the United States are staggering. The Polaris Project, a leading organization combating human trafficking, reported over 11,500 cases of human trafficking in the United States in 2019, and these are just the reported cases. The actual number is believed to be much higher, as many victims are too afraid or too controlled to come forward. But what makes the United States such an attractive destination for child sex trafficking? One reason is its vast size and diverse population. With major cities and transportation hubs scattered across the country, traffickers have ample opportunities to exploit vulnerable children. Additionally, the United States is a global economic powerhouse, making it an attractive market for the buying and selling of human beings. Another shocking fact is that child sex trafficking is not limited to the dark corners of society. It's happening right in our own communities. The U.S. Department of Justice estimates that 83% of sex trafficking victims in the United States are not migrants. They are U.S. citizens. These are our neighbors, our classmates, our friends' children. The harsh reality is that child sex trafficking is not a problem that only exists in faraway lands. It's happening right here, right now. The victims of child sex trafficking come from all walks of life. They are boys and girls, ranging in age from as young as infants to teenagers. They come from broken homes, foster care systems, and even seemingly stable families. Traffickers prey on vulnerability, manipulating their victims with promises of love, protection, and a better life. Once trapped, these children are subjected to unspeakable horrors and forced into a life of sexual exploitation. Traffickers are cunning and manipulative, preying on the vulnerabilities of their victims. One common tactic is grooming, a process in which the trafficker builds a relationship with the child, gaining their trust and affection. They may pose as a boyfriend, a mentor, or even a family member, showering the child with attention, gifts, and promises of a better life. This emotional manipulation creates a sense of dependency, making it difficult for the victim to escape. Another tactic used by traffickers is coercion. They exploit the vulnerabilities of their victims using threats, violence, and psychological manipulation to maintain control. They may threaten to harm the victim or their loved ones, or they may use blackmail, such as threatening to expose embarrassing or incriminating information. The fear instilled in these young victims keeps them trapped in a cycle of abuse. Traffickers also utilize technology to their advantage. With the rise of social media and online platforms, they have easier access to potential victims. They exploit the anonymity of the internet, creating fake profiles and engaging in online grooming. They lure vulnerable children into their trap, often convincing them to meet in person under the guise of a romantic relationship or a promising opportunity. The use of drugs is another disturbing tactic employed by traffickers. They may sedate their victims, making them easier to control and manipulate. Drugs also serve as a means of addiction, ensuring the victim remains dependent on the trafficker for their supply. This vicious cycle further entangles the victim in the web of exploitation. It's important to note that traffickers are not always strangers. In many cases, they are individuals known to the victim, such as family members, friends, or acquaintances. This betrayal of trust makes it even more difficult for the victim to seek help or escape their captor. The lines between love, loyalty, and exploitation become blurred, leaving the victim trapped in a web of manipulation. The tactics used by traffickers are designed to break down the victim's sense of self-worth and control. They strip away their identity, reducing them to mere commodities to be bought and sold. The psychological trauma inflicted on these young victims is immeasurable, leaving lasting scars that may never fully heal. Texas especially holds a dark distinction. It ranks second in the nation for reported cases of human trafficking. In 2020 alone, a staggering 987 cases were reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. This number is a chilling reminder that human trafficking is not a distant problem, but a harsh reality that hits close to home. However, it is crucial to recognize that reported cases only scratch the surface of the true extent of human trafficking in Texas. The elusive nature of this crime makes it challenging to detect and measure accurately. The University of Texas School of Social Work estimates that at any given time, approximately 313,000 people are being trafficked in Texas. This includes 79,000 children and youth who are victims of sex trafficking, and 234,000 who are victims of labor trafficking. The difficulty in detecting human trafficking stems from various factors. Victims are frequently moved across different locations, making it difficult to track their movements and gather evidence. Traffickers exploit this mobility to avoid detection and maintain their operations under the radar. The vast size and diverse population of Texas also contribute to the challenges in detecting and measuring human trafficking. The state is home to bustling metropolitan areas like Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas-Fort Worth, as well as the lower Rio Grande Valley. These regions, often referred to as the Texas Triangle, serve as hotspots for human trafficking due to their population density and economic activity. The Texas Triangle's interconnectedness and proximity to major transportation routes facilitate the movement of trafficked migrants and citizens, making it easier for traffickers to exploit vulnerable populations. The transient nature of these areas, with people constantly coming and going, further complicates efforts to identify and rescue victims. Another significant hurdle in accurately measuring human trafficking is the underreporting of cases. Victims may fear retaliation from their traffickers or lack trust in law enforcement, preventing them from coming forward. Additionally, cultural and language barriers can further deter victims from seeking help or reporting their experiences. Human trafficking not only inflicts deep emotional scars on its victims, but also has a significant economic impact on our society. The costs associated with caring for survivors, the burden on law enforcement and the criminal justice system, and the exploitation of lost wages all contribute to the hidden economic toll of human trafficking. According to a study conducted by the University of Texas, child and youth sex trafficking costs Texas approximately $6.6 billion. This staggering figure takes into account the long-term costs of caring for survivors over their lifetimes. It includes expenses such as mental and physical health care, counseling services, and other social support systems that survivors require to heal and rebuild their lives. The burden on law enforcement and the criminal justice system is another significant economic consequence of human trafficking. Detecting, investigating, and prosecuting trafficking cases requires extensive resources and manpower. Law enforcement agencies must allocate significant time and funding to combat this crime, diverting resources from other critical areas of public safety. Lost wages resulting from labor trafficking also contribute to the economic toll of human trafficking. Labor traffickers exploit their victims, forcing them to work under exploitative conditions and often withholding their wages. It is estimated that labor traffickers exploit approximately $600 million in lost wages from victims in Texas every year. This exploitation not only robs individuals of their rightful earnings, but also perpetuates cycles of poverty and economic vulnerability. The economic impact of human trafficking extends beyond the immediate costs of caring for survivors and the exploitation of lost wages. It also affects our communities and economy at large. The presence of human trafficking undermines trust, safety, and social cohesion, which are essential for a thriving economy. It deters businesses, investors, and tourists, tarnishing the reputation of the state and hindering economic growth. Furthermore, the economic consequences of human trafficking are not limited to the direct costs incurred. They also ripple through various sectors of the economy. For instance, the healthcare system bears the burden of providing medical and mental health services to survivors. Social service organizations and nonprofit agencies struggle to meet the growing demand for support and assistance. Additionally, the productivity and potential of survivors are often hindered as they face significant challenges in reintegrating into the workforce and achieving economic stability. However, it is also important to note that whatever is happening in the United States is happening on the other side of the globe. Many of these cases are even more disturbing. It is not limited to the US. In every corner of the UK, women and girls are being kept as slaves and sold for sex. We are brainwashed. They are programmed. According to BBC correspondent Jean Mackenzie, Romanian girls have become big business in this shocking trade. Romanian traffickers have perfected the art of grooming vulnerable young girls, exploiting their innocence and trust. These predators lurk in the shadows, preying on the most vulnerable members of our society. Their targets? Girls as young as 10, who are unsuspecting and easily manipulated. The grooming process begins with the trafficker traffickers identifying their potential victims. They often target girls who come from troubled backgrounds, where they may lack stability, support, or positive role models. These girls are desperate for attention, love, and a sense of belonging, and that's exactly what the traffickers offer them. They approach their victims in school playgrounds, parks, or even online, posing as friends or potential romantic partners. They know exactly what to say and do to gain the girls' trust. They shower them with attention, compliments, and gifts, making them feel special and desired. They exploit their vulnerabilities, such as low self-esteem, difficult family situations, or a desire for adventure. As the relationship progresses, the traffickers slowly introduce the girls to the world of exploitation. They may start by asking for small favors, such as running errands or delivering packages. These seemingly innocent tasks make the girls feel important and needed. They believe they are helping someone they care about. But little do they know, these tasks are just the beginning. The traffickers gradually escalate their demands, pushing the boundaries further each time. They may ask the girls to meet new people, attend parties, or engage in activities that make them uncomfortable. The girls, desperate to please and maintain the connection they have formed, comply without questioning. The traffickers use a combination of manipulation, coercion, and emotional blackmail to keep the girls under their control. They make them believe that they are the only ones who truly care about them, that they are their only source of love and support. They isolate them from their friends and family, making them dependent on the traffickers for everything. To further solidify their control, the traffickers may introduce drugs or alcohol into the equation. They use these substances to cloud the girls' judgment, making them more susceptible to manipulation and less likely to resist their demands. The girls become trapped in a cycle of addiction and exploitation with no way out. The grooming process can take weeks, months, or even years. These Romanian traffickers are patient and persistent, knowing that the longer they invest in grooming their victims, the more control they will have over them. They carefully monitor the girls' every move, ensuring they are always within their reach and under their influence. It is important to note that grooming is not a one-time event. It is a continuous process where the traffickers constantly reinforce their control over the girls. They use a combination of rewards and punishments to maintain their power. They may shower the girls with affection and gifts when they comply, but resort to threats, violence, or emotional manipulation when they resist. The consequences of this grooming process are devastating. These Romanian girls' innocence is stolen from them, replaced by fear, shame, and a distorted sense of self-worth. They are stripped of their childhood and forced to grow up far too soon. Their education is disrupted, their dreams are shattered, and their chances of leading a normal life are severely diminished. Once the Romanian traffickers have successfully groomed their victims, they begin the harrowing process of transporting them to the UK. This journey is filled with danger, fear, and unimaginable hardships. The traffickers employ a complex network of individuals and routes designed to evade law enforcement and border control. The girls are often smuggled across borders in cramped and dangerous conditions. They are hidden in the back of trucks, squeezed into small compartments, or forced to endure long and treacherous journeys on foot. They are at the mercy of their captors, who show no regard for their safety or well-being. The traffickers exploit the girls' vulnerability and fear, ensuring their compliance throughout the journey. They threaten them with violence, both physical and psychological, making it clear that any attempt to escape or seek help will result in severe consequences. The girls are trapped, with no means of escape and no one to turn to for help. The journey to the UK is filled with uncertainty and fear. The girls have no idea what awaits them on the other side. They are told stories of a better life, of opportunities and prosperity, but the reality is far from what they have been promised. Instead, they are destined for a life of exploitation and abuse. Upon arrival in the UK, the girls are immediately thrust into the dark world of prostitution. They are forced to sell their bodies to strangers, to endure acts that no child should ever have to experience. Their innocence is shattered, their bodies violated, and their spirits broken. The traffickers control every aspect of the girls' lives. They dictate where they live, who they interact with, and the clients they service. The girls are often moved from city to city, making it difficult for them to establish any form of support or escape. They are isolated, cut off from the outside world, and completely dependent on their captors. The consequences of this life of prostitution are devastating. The girls suffer physical and emotional abuse on a daily basis. They are subjected to violence, degradation, and humiliation. Their bodies bear the scars of their exploitation, while their minds are haunted by the trauma they have endured. But perhaps one of the most shocking aspects of this issue is the failure of authorities to properly investigate these cases. When many of the girls are reported missing, the Romanian authorities have been accused of failing to take appropriate action. The BBC has highlighted numerous cases where these reports have been overlooked or dismissed, leaving the victims without any hope of rescue. This lack of action not only perpetuates the cycle of trafficking, but also sends a message to the traffickers traffickers that they can continue their operations with impunity. It is a failure of justice, a betrayal of the most vulnerable members of our society. The authorities must be held accountable for their inaction and must prioritize the investigation and prosecution of these traffickers. If you think this is both heartbreaking and infuriating, you're right. However, the stories of young girls enslaved in Bangladesh's brothels will shatter your heart. Let's look at the story of one of them, Labani. After 5 long years in the brothel, Labani had given up on the dream of being rescued. At the tender age of 13, she was sold to a ruthless madam who promised her a better life, but it was a promise that had never been fulfilled. Labani had lost count of the number of customers who had come and gone, their faces blurring together in her memory. Each day, starting from 9 a.m., there would be a steady stream of men, one after another, seeking pleasure at the expense of her innocence. Labani, now 19 years old, had resigned herself to a life of despair and suffering in Mymensingh, a brothel village located in the heart of Bangladesh. Here, between 700 and 1,000 women and girls were trapped in the sex trade, many of them against their will. The conditions were deplorable, with girls as young as 12 forced to sleep 5 to a room, their beds separated only by torn cotton curtains. The air was heavy with the blaring music from sound systems, attempting to drown out the cries of pain and desperation. Homemade liquor, poured from plastic bottles, was the only solace for numbing the physical and emotional torment they endured. As Labani navigated through the alleys of the brothel, she would often come across men swaggering shirtless, their eyes scanning for vulnerable girls to exploit. These men were willing to pay 400 taka, about 3.66 pounds, for a mere 10 minutes of sex. But it was the brothel owners who reaped the majority of the profits. Labani and the other girls were mere commodities, their bodies sold for the pleasure of those who controlled their lives. Labani's journey into this living nightmare began when she was just a child. At the age of 13, she made the desperate decision to flee from an abusive marriage, leaving behind her 6-month-old daughter. The marriage, forced upon her the year before, had been a cruel ceremony that coincided with the onset of her first period. With no clear destination in mind, Labani found herself at Dhaka railway station, tears streaming down her face. It was there that a woman noticed her distress and approached her with an offer of food and a place to sleep for the night. Labani, vulnerable and desperate, accepted the woman's kindness without fully understanding the consequences. 2 days later, Labani's fate was sealed as she was sold to the brothel for a sum of 180 pounds, forbidden to ever leave. Overnight, Labani's life transformed into a nightmare of bondage and exploitation. She became a chukri, a bonded sex worker, trapped within the confines of the brothel until she could repay the fabricated debts imposed upon her. The madam who had bought her claimed that she owed over 914 pounds, a debt that seemed insurmountable. To further solidify her control, the madam bribed the police to falsify Labani's age, stating that she was 18, the legal age for a registered sex worker. With her phone confiscated and locked in her bedroom, Labani was left with no means of escape. The madam made it clear that any attempt to run away would result in severe punishment. For the first few months, Labani clung to a glimmer of hope, attempting to escape the clutches of her captors. But the brothel was a tightly controlled environment, and the madam's network of influence extended even to the police. Labani soon realized that escape was a futile endeavor. "They always find you," she would later say, her voice devoid of any hope. As the years passed, Labani found herself trapped in a vicious cycle of exploitation. Every penny she earned went directly to her madam, leaving her with a meager monthly allowance of £37 for basic necessities such as food, clothes, and toiletries. It was a pittance compared to the vast sums of money she generated for her captors. Labani's story is just one of many in the brothels of Bangladesh, where the profits from the global trade in women and girls are staggering. The immense profitability of sex trafficking, estimated to generate tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit per victim, highlights the urgent need for action. Bangladesh government estimates that around 100,000 women and girls are working in the country's sex industry, with less than 10% of them having entered prostitution voluntarily. This investigation has uncovered countless stories of girls being sold by strangers, family members, or even their own husbands without their consent. The conviction rate for individuals arrested in connection with trafficking is shockingly low, standing at less than 0.5%. Out of over 6,000 people arrested since 2013, only 25 have been convicted. Last year, a mere 8 traffickers were convicted in Bangladesh. One of the key factors contributing to the perpetuation of this heinous trade is the complicity of powerful institutions. The brothels, some of which have been in operation for centuries, are registered with the government and monitored by the local police. It is a triumvirate of government, police, and religion that watches over and approves the rape, enslavement, and abuse of hundreds of thousands of prepubescent girls. As part of this investigation, more than 20 underage girls in 4 different brothels showed their notarized certificates, falsely stating that they were over 18. One girl even admitted that she was still just 13 years old. The collusion between law enforcement and the local mafia is evident, creating a chain of power that extends from the brothels to the highest levels of authority. The girls are seen as disposable by those who profit from their exploitation. The number of suicides among these girls has reached such alarming levels that some brothels have had to build private graveyards to cope with the dead. In central Bangladesh, brothels like Kandapara and Doladia have had to resort to burying the bodies of these young girls in unmarked graves, hidden away from public view. Shilpi, a 57-year-old woman who was sold to the Doladia brothel in 1977, has witnessed the increasing number of deaths firsthand. There's about 1 death a month, she reveals. It never used to be this many. Shilpi, who conducts the funerals, recalls how they used to tie stones around the girls' necks and throw their bodies into the pond. But sometimes the bodies would float to the surface, forcing them to find land for burial. The stigma surrounding sex workers in Bangladesh prevents these girls from being buried in public graveyards. They are considered shameful and unworthy of a proper burial. The society's disdain for them is so strong that when a girl takes her own life, people often say it's a good riddance, a quicker way for them to reach hell. Labani, like many others, has also contemplated suicide multiple times. The concrete cell she calls her bedroom is a bleak reminder of her captivity. The walls are etched with her customers' phone numbers, a stark reminder of the men who exploit her. In her darkest moments, she resorts to cutting herself, a desperate attempt to escape the pain that engulfs her existence. The mental health problems faced by these bonded brothel workers are deeply rooted and pervasive. Even when their debts are paid off, they struggle to move on. The stories of Laboni and countless other young girls enslaved in Bangladesh's brothels are a reminder of the urgent need for change. The systemic failures, corruption, and complicity that allow this trade to thrive must be confronted head-on. It is only through awareness, advocacy, and support that we can hope to bring an end to the living hell endured by these children. If you enjoyed this video, click on the card showing on your screen right now for more videos.